On the other hand, I'm going to give my talk from over here. How does this thing work?
It makes you say the same thing over and over and over again.
Well, I do that anyway, so this has been nothing new. So good morning. If you came in a little bit late, there's still a few teddy bears up here that could use some love, and one of our wonderful practitioners would be happy to deliver you a teddy bear if you'll just kind of raise a hand. And anybody, there's Lori over there and Joanne over here, and these fine folks over there. Yeah, there's two more up here. Three more up here, actually. There's one in the box. A boxed bear. So while they're delivering them, today's the third Sunday of Advent. We've been kind of following along with the Advent season and kind of working with that. The idea of Advent is a preparation time. It's a waiting and a preparation time. Advent literally comes from the Latin word, and vent is wind, and ad is to or toward. And so it's following the wind toward where we want to go. It's riding the wind, if you will, that's moving us in a direction. And the direction that's moving us in is into that deeper experience of spirit, into that deeper experience of the light and of the Christ consciousness. And the Christ consciousness, as some of you know, is not limited to one person. It's a consciousness that lives within all of us as we awaken it within us. So what we're moving towards is the awakening and celebration of that awakening of the Christ consciousness with the Advent wreath. And so the first Sunday that we celebrated the idea of hope. And if you're going through a dark time, such as the light, seeming to be shorter and shorter every single day, it's good to have hope. It's good to know that light will return and to have hope for that. And sometimes that's all we can start with is just, I hope that this will happen. I hope that this will happen. And yet that's a much better place than having no hope at all. Probably many of us, myself included, have been in that no hope at all place. And it's a very, very dark place. So hope is like the first star in the night sky. When we see that first star, and we have to have that darkness to allow ourselves to see the stars. And so that's where we start. The next Sunday we moved then, as we began to allow that hope to take ground within us, to grow within us, we moved into an experience and expression of, I was trying to combine those two words together, it didn't work, of love. The quality is love for the second Sunday. And so as we move into that hope, as we move into that awareness of the consciousness and the light that we're moving towards, we start to have an experience of love both towards and from that light. And so that's what we celebrated and honored last Sunday. This Sunday is that we move into an experience of joy. And you'll notice it's the rose-colored candle in the traditional, if you were in a Catholic or Episcopal or Lutheran church, today would be called Gaudete Sunday, which is the first word of the reading, which means rejoice. Gaudete is Latin for rejoice. And so we are rejoicing today. That little song, everybody rejoice, is going through my head at the moment. But today is a day to rejoice, and it comes from the reading, which is from Paul's letter to the Philippians, and it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice." What a great way to start, right? Rejoice. Anybody want to rejoice with me? Rejoice. Yeah. Let your humility be known to all, for Spirit is right here. Do not worry about anything. Isn't that a great remembrance? Do not worry about anything. But in all things, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your minds and hearts. Finally, my brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honest, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good report, if there's any virtue and if there's any praise, think on these things. Isn't that a great summary of our teaching right there? We start off by rejoicing in a present God, a spirit, an infinite presence that is right here. It's at hand. It's right here. Let your humility be known to all. And I want to work with this word humility because we meet it again in the word supplication. Supplication, when I grew up Catholic, I kind of had this picture in my mind of, you get down on your knees and prostrate yourself and all that, but it's not. The dictionary definition is that you ask humbly and earnestly. And when I think of humbleness and humility, it's not about me. It's not about my small ego and what it wants. It's about opening up to allowing the will of God, the movement of the divine to move through me. I am humble. Moses was described as the meekest of God's servants. That is, that he was out of the way of his small ego and allowed Spirit to come through him, God to guide him. And so when we align ourselves with Spirit, we're going to talk about this during the talk, but when we align ourselves with Spirit, when we get humble, when we're not worried about anything, when we let the worry go. See, worry is just negative imagining. It's the use of our imagination, imaging power, in a direction we don't want to go. The movie Fantastic Beasts, which is out right now, the kind of the new Harry Potter movie, is any of those of you who know me well know that I would be one of the first ones to see that, and I was. The main character at one point in there says, I don't believe in worry. Why torture yourself twice? Why torture yourself twice? Once to be all scared and worked up about it, and the other one to experience whatever it is you're worried about if it actually happens to happen. And so do not worry, but in all things by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. And so by opening with prayer, by being humble, by being earnest, which is serious, which is clear, with our heart in it. And then by thanksgiving, allow Spirit to manifest through us. Let your requests be known, and that peace which passes understanding shall keep your minds and hearts. And finally, that wonderful passage of focusing on that which is light, that which is love, that which is whole, pure, that which is of praise and of good report. That's where we keep our minds. I could quit here and that would be my whole talk right there. I mean, that passage is so beautiful. So that's our Advent that we're holding for today, our rejoicing that we are doing today. The actual talk that's being done, that we're doing, is called A Personal Experience of the Divine. Many of you know that we're working, as most religious science churches in the world are working on a theme of creating a world that works for everyone. And so this is the idea that we're looking at today, a personal experience of the divine. And it comes from the vision that we teach spiritual practices to address the everyday life. And that's what I love about this teaching. It's not just a pie-in-the-sky theoretical teaching. It's to address everyday life. It's for you and I to have better day-to-day lives. Isn't that cool? I mean, that's what I want. That's what I love about this teaching. And so Ernest Holmes, our founder, says, the apparent intangibility of the principle of mental practice is lessened whenever and wherever anyone actually demonstrates the supremacy of spiritual thought force over apparent material resistance. The apparent intangibility of principle. We talk about principle a lot. You can't see or taste or touch a principle, right? The principle of gravity, what does it look like? What does the principle of gravity look like? What does the principle of aerodynamics look like? Okay? But I'm pretty sure that gravity is tangibly working right now because none of you are floating right at the moment, and bumping into the ceiling or the walls or each other. It's working, and the aerodynamics is working. Right now we're not, having too much of an effect of that. The principle of electricity is working. I know that because we flipped some switches and stuff happened. It was cool. But the principle can't be seen. However, the result of the principle can be seen. And what he says is the intangibility is lessened whenever we actually demonstrate it, whenever we actually move it into form and experience. So it's a method. What we're here about is a method. What our teaching is about is a method. Ernest actually said at one point in time that he wishes he could have called us the Methodists, but the name was already taken. Because we have a method for applying spiritual principle into human form, into human needs and aspirations. So it's a practical process for harnessing the infinite energy and directing it wisely and well. And so we have to, first of all, direct ourselves to be in alignment with it. See, I can wish electricity worked my way, the way that I wanted it to, okay? But it doesn't. It works its way, right? Electricity works its own way. If I know what that way is, and if I work in alignment with electricity, things work well. If I don't know how it works, or if I refuse to work in alignment with electricity, things can get a little hot, uncomfortable. Okay? And it's the same thing with spirit. We have to know how it works. When we want to harness any energy, we have to work with it. There's a story that some of you may have heard of a man who walks into a bank to cash a check. And the teller says, okay, sign your name on the back and I'll give, hand it to me and I'll give you the money. And the man says, well, but if I sign my name on the back and give it to you, then you've got my check. And you might just keep the money. And she says, but I'm bonded, we're in a bank, this is how it works. And they go back and forth like this for a while, and he refuses to sign the check, but he wants his money. And she finally says, I can't help you. So he leaves. He goes to a second bank, has the same conversation with that teller. Okay? Same thing back and forth. You got to sign it. No, I don't want to sign it. Back and forth. He finally leaves that bank and he goes to a third bank and he's having the same conversation with the teller. I don't want to sign it. It may not work this way. And she finally reaches down underneath her desk, picks up a baseball bat, a plastic baseball bat, whacks him over the head with it, and she goes, sign the damn check. And he signs the damn check, hands it over to her, and she gives him the money. And he takes the money and he goes back to the first bank and the first teller. And he says, look, the bank down the street, they gave me the money. And she goes, well, but you probably still had to sign the check first. And he says, well, yes, I did, but nobody ever explained it to me the way that she did. And so sometimes the universe is trying to explain to us how it works, and we want to go, I want it to work my way. Okay? And I can tell you, from having been whacked on the head by a lot of baseball bats in my life, it doesn't work that way. No matter how many times we do. So we start to learn with it. So religious science teaches us how to work with that energy. And first we need to know about the nature of that infinite energy, that infinite presence. And that first of all, it's a unity. It's a unity, which means that it is whole, which means that everything that God is present everywhere at the same moment of space and time. Meister Eckhart, the 14th century mystic, said that God is that whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Center is everywhere. Yesterday, as part of our silent retreat, I was walking the labyrinth. We walked the labyrinth as part of that. And I was walking the labyrinth, and I suddenly realized that the center of the labyrinth was right where I was standing. Now, the painted center was over here somewhere, but each step I took was a center of the labyrinth. Each step you and I take is a center of God. Each of us is a center of God. You and I are the faces of God, as the song sang for the children. So that nature is that it's a unity, and that it's fully present everywhere. In our first service, when Chris was doing the treatment, he used the wonderful phrase, one of my favorite phrases, there is no spot where God is not. There's no spot where God is not. When we teach that oftentimes in the children's church. And we have to remember there's no place where there's more of God present or less of God present. It's all fully present right here, right now, all of it. And you and I get to play with that. We learn about its qualities, that it has a quality of life. You've noticed that there's life happening, right? And so it has that quality of life. It has that quality of love. It has that quality of light. It has that quality of power, of peace, of beauty, and of joy. These are the qualities of God. And because it's a unity, and because it's all there is, because it's infinite, you and I are one of it. There's nothing outside of it. Nothing is separate from it. We may forget it. We may act completely backwards from it, just like if we're not working with electricity, we're working backwards from it. But it's still the truth. You and I are one of the life, the love, the light, the power, the peace, the beauty, and the joy of God right here, right now. That will never change. Breathe that in with me for a moment. And just say to yourself, I am that. I am that. Because we're one of it, we embody all of those qualities. That is the truth of who we are. No matter what we ever do or don't do, that truth doesn't change. And again, we may forget it. We may act as if that's not our truth, but it never changes. It is constantly our truth. So we come to understand it, this infinite presence, and we come to understand our own relationship with it, that you and I are one with it. There's no separation. There's no part of that judges us and says, well, I'm cutting you off because you're not very good. And I'm rewarding you because you're really good. It just works. Jesus said the rain falls over the heads of the just and the unjust alike. And as we talked about before, when you're in a desert, rain is a really good thing. It's life-giving energy, okay? When I used to talk about this in Seattle, everybody would say, yeah, we know the rain falls over the heads of the but when you're in a desert community, that rain is a good thing. So then we ask ourselves the question, so this is true, this is how it works. Now, how do I apply that to my life? Okay? How do I do this? So we have to understand that the Infinite One, first of all, is selective. It chooses. You've noticed that there's not just a solid blob of one thingness in the universe, right? It kind of has stars and planets, and right here on our planet it has water and land and oceans and fish and animals walking around, flying around. There's trees, there's rocks, there's you and me, and I've noticed that you and me, each of us, are unique. So the universe selects, it chooses, it creates with its selection. And it has the ability to put that into motion also, to have the initiative to make that happen. See, it's one thing for me to select chocolate. It's another thing for me to get up and actually go get the chocolate. That's putting it into motion. That's the initiative, right? And so the universe both chooses and makes it happen, brings it into form. The first book of Genesis, the first chapter of Genesis, actually gives an idea of what that's like. In the beginning, God said, let there be, and then it went through all this stuff, right? Let there be this, and 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 let there be this. This is how the universe works in consciousness. Consciousness chooses. You and I didn't create this universe, right? We didn't start the whole thing off. Okay? Right. Did one of you? Okay, just wanted to make sure we're all... We didn't start this. They've had to choose. There's something before us, a consciousness that chose to show up, and you and I are part of that showing up. We are part of the personalness of God. You and I, if you want to have a personal experience with God, look at the person next to you and you're having a personal experience with God. Or look in the mirror and you're having a personal experience with God. Okay? So it chooses, and it makes that choice into form and makes it happen. So we, being points of consciousness, embody that same process. We, in consciousness, get to choose. And we get to make it happen. Isn't that cool? Yes. That's cool. We get to choose our life. Now, if you're like me, the first time I heard that, I'm sitting going, ew, for parts of my life. Because I suddenly realized that there are some apparent choices that I didn't want to admit that I made those choices, because stuff was showing up over here that didn't feel real good. Smelled pretty bad. It wasn't my favorite kinds of chocolate, to use a metaphor. So our method of creation is our thought. Our thought polarizes matter and shows up into form. And all things are created first in thought and then in form. The chair you're sitting on was first an idea in someone's mind before it was ever manufactured. The clothing you're wearing, the teddy bears you're holding, were all thoughts in somebody's mind. The fact we even have teddy bears here was a thought in somebody's mind before that all showed up. So our thoughts create, and our creations reflect our thoughts, and they reflect what we put our attention or interest on. Michael Beckwith says it's not so much what we think, it's what our mind is interested in. What am I constantly interested in? And the universe corresponds to that, because that's where I'm directing my energy on a regular basis. See, I happen to talk about chocolate a lot, right? You might have noticed, okay? And so I have people who give me chocolate on a regular basis. Or things that say, like, keep calm and eat chocolate, or whatever it is, that little sign that's hanging up outside my door from my daughter. Because I show interest in that. I have a friend who for a long time was interested in frog statues and things like that. And every Christmas and every birthday she would get frogs, because that was her interest, okay? So we get more of what we're interested in. When Jesus says to him that has more shall be given, it's what is your mind interested in? What are you already paying attention to? That is what you're going to get more of. That is what you're going to get more of. So we vibrate at the level of our thinking, and we energize substance into form from that level. Okay? And it's a beautiful process until we notice that we're creating things we don't want. It's what I call the good news, bad news of this teaching. You know, there's some other teachings I kind of like a little bit better because you can blame a devil or spirits or demons or stuff like that. And here we just say, no. If it's in my life, I either called it in myself consciously or unconsciously. And so much of what doesn't work in our lives, most of us didn't walk around consciously calling in. But we unconsciously allowed somebody else to suggest to us who we are and what we are, and allowed that to then show up as our life. So when we become aware of that process, okay, we become aware that we're creating these things through our thinking. And at first it's kind of a, but then you realize that if I created this through my thinking, I can create something new through my thinking. And that's the cool part of this teaching. If there's something in your life you don't like, you can change it, right? By our thinking, by changing our thinking and by changing our beingness. Okay? We become aware that we've picked up thought baggage along the way and we can dump it. We can dump it. And so this is where the application comes in. This is where the method comes in. And so we start to sit down with a couple of powerful questions. Number one, how do I change my thinking to align with what I truly want? How can I start to change my thinking to align with what I truly want? And number two, how do I become aware of what I truly want? See, a lot of what we have in our lives that we find is frustrating is stuff that we ourselves, probably from our real, true, deep soul space, never chose. We chose it because somebody else said it was good for us. There's so many people I know that are in careers because their parents thought that would be a good career for them. Or because at the start they said, well, yeah, I'd love to do this, but I can't make any money doing that, so I'm going to do this instead. Okay? And so we don't choose from our true self. And so to take the time to come back and center, and what does my true self want? What do I truly want? It's a powerful question that says, what would I love? What I love in my life. And we start to create from that. And so then the work becomes, number one, I pay attention to my thinking, which sounds easy, but it's not. Right now I'm working with a coach who's really walking me on a detail by detail by detail level through my thinking. And it's a painful process. It's a messy process. And there's some stuff in there that I don't really want to admit that I'm thinking it, but it is, I'm thinking it. And so we're working through healing that stuff. What is my mental equivalent, which is a religious science term that says, who am I really? What is it? What is my normal? What am I used to? Ernest Holmes says it's a great mistake to say, take what you wish, for you can have anything you like. We do not take what we wish, but we do attract to ourselves that which is like our thought. And in this next sentence, he puts all in capitals. And when Ernest is writing all in capitals, it's sort of like, this is the wake up. Listen to this. He says, man must become more if he wishes to draw a greater good into his life. So it's not what I wish. I have to become more. I have to be vibrating at a different level. He says we need not labor under the delusion that all we have to do is say that everything is ours. This is true in capital R reality, but in fact, it is only as true as we make it. It is only as true as we make it. Can we demonstrate that? Can we manifest that? And so I pay attention to my thinking and I align it into spiritual truth. What is the actual truth of me? And so the process, one of the powerful processes we use here, and some of you have been exposed to it, is the process of spiritual mind treatment, our 5-step prayer process, where we start off with the first step of God is all there is. We align ourselves, we become aware of this infinite presence, what it is. What it is. Because if I'm going to plug into the electricity, I better be knowing what it is. And then I'm one of it. Second step, I'm one of it. It is, and I'm one of that. I remember this truth. Because oftentimes when I'm stuck in my stuff, I've forgotten one or both of those truths. And so how can I get myself back into alignment with that? I start by speaking that, by remembering that, by sitting in that consciousness and that awareness until I really, really, really get it in my heart and my body, and I'm knowing it and becoming that. And so we already kind of walked through that in the first part of this talk. Steps 3 and 4 then are where we ground that idea, the idea that there's this infinite presence and we're one of it, into how do I want that specifically to show up in my life? I want it to show up as my greater health in my body, as greater health in my finances, as greater joy in my work, as greater creativity in my life, as more friends, as more loving relationships. However it is, I start to specifically say, this is how I want it to show up, and then I give thanks for it as though it's already there, because it's already there in consciousness. See, if we live in a field of infinite love, we're already in love. We may not be experiencing it, and we're just clearing the stuff out that keeps us from experiencing what's already here. We live in a field of infinite wealth, and if we're not experiencing great wealth for our lives, in whatever that fullness of that word is, then we're clearing out whatever keeps us separate from that. So that's our steps, and that moves us into alignment with the truth. And finally, we release it. We let it go. It's a recognition that it's not I, but the Father within that does the work. See, I don't have to figure out, if I go to that light switch back there, I don't have to sit there and make the electricity move from that light switch up into the lights, light up the filaments and all that. I don't have to make that happen, do I? I just flip the switch and it happens. I let it be. And so that's what we're doing once we have spoken our word. Once we start to move into that awareness and start to move into a greater alignment with our truth, then we let that truth show up. We let it flow, and however it's supposed to flow. So that's the process that we use. This week, what I want to invite us to do is to first examine an area that you would like to experience more life. Somewhere in your life that you would like to experience more of the flow of the electricity of the divine. And just pick one, choose one for yourself. And then ask, what must I be believing to produce my current results? See, if I want to have brighter lights, I have to bring in more electricity, right? Or make more available. So what must I be doing to manifest the current level of electricity? And become aware of that, or become aware that my thoughts might has equal my results. And then the third part is create and begin to practice a new belief. So what is it that I want to believe that will bring in a greater experience of the divine in my life in that area? Who would I have to become? How would I have to, I'll call it this, vibrate in my life at the cellular level, at the thought level, at the energetic level? What must I believe in order to allow that? And so that's our practice for this week, to choose, to notice just what's happening now, and to invite in what is it that I must do to expand that and let that happen. So I invite us to practice this week. Our practitioners can support you in that process, both here in prayer after the service, but also for counseling, for coaching in that process, because they're excellent. All our practitioners here, ministers and practitioners, are excellent thought coaches to help to turn on the switch to allow more life to flow through you. So I invite you to take advantage of that. I want to close with a quote from Ernest, who says that man's mind should swing from inspiration to action, from contemplation to accomplishment, from prayer to performance. This would be a well-balanced existence. The spirit fires the soul with energy and understanding, and the soul, which is the subjective mentality, vitalizes the body and animates all that we do. So we start with that process within. We start with aligning our thoughts, and then out of that we allow ourselves to be moved into action, moved into expressing that thought in the most beautiful way possible. So I invite us to allow that movement to happen this week. Let's pray. There is only one life, one love, one light, one power, one life and only one life. That life is an infinite good that is so good it's beyond our comprehension, an infinite love that passes understanding, and a peace that passes understanding. That infinite presence is all there is. Always present, always on, always available. Because it is all there is, that you and I are one of this. Each of us is one of this presence here and now. Each of us already is the life, the light, the love, the power, the peace, the joy and the beauty of the divine. Each of us already is this. Already is, fully, completely. And so I speak my word that today we remember that. and allow it to flow more fully, to light up our lives and the lives of those around us in the light of this world, more fully than ever before. We are the light of this world. We are the Christ consciousness being born and awakening again and again. We are the Buddha being born and awakening again and again. We are that. And we simply allow that to show up in our lives, to express in ever more wonderful ways simply by saying yes to it. And in gratitude, knowing that this is the truth of each of us already, I'm grateful for all the good and all the light that moves into each of our lives as we simply say yes to more and more good, more and more God, more and more of that infinite spirit. And then we let go. I release this word, this process, knowing that I of myself can do nothing, but the Father within me doeth the work. I release it into that process we call the law, and let it show up and let it manifest into form. And it does so because that's its nature. I'm in alignment with Spirit, and it must manifest. And so it is.